about 6 lines from the bottom. Lema Ketanoi. It's 23a. Learning a machlekes Shabavo and Chizkiah. If every time the Torah says don't eat, if it means don't have enjoyment. That's the opinion of Rabbi Vo. Chizkiah says only if it says lo yeyachel, it should not be eaten in a passive. So then that means you shouldn't have enjoyment. But otherwise, it just means don't eat. That's machlekes Chizkiah and Rabbi Vo. The Gemara says, let us say that this machlekes Chizkiah and Rabbi Vo is actually machlekes Tanaim. Means it precedes Chizkiah and Rabbi Vo. Now that's a little bit of an issue. It's lema ketanai is a question. We don't like it when that happens. The Gemara is going to try to resolve that they each agree to one side or whatever, and they each argue. Otherwise, it's why didn't they mention it? Then why didn't they just say I hold like this one, I hold like that one? Why they have to develop it on their own? So the pasuk. No, that's impossible. They knew the Mishnayos. So the pasuk says, "Yiyasa l'chol malacha."
Sorry, so every time they say yes,
they're going to try to get.
They should have known that. So therefore,
yeah, you'll see the Gemara tries to get out of that. The Gemara is going to say, "Loy." It's not. That's not the case. The pasuk says, "Yiyasa l'chol malacha." We're talking about the chaylev of nevela. An animal dies, you can use the fat for whatever you want. What does it mean for all malacha? It should say use it for malacha. Sheyachol, because we could have thought interesting logic. We know that fat is you're not allowed to eat, but you're allowed to burn it on the mizbeach. So we could have thought that if an animal dies, you're allowed to use the fat, not for personal use, because you're not allowed to eat it, but maybe you should be allowed to use it for using it for, maybe use it in tanning skins or something, use it for oil. Maybe you could use it for skins that come from the Beis Hamikdash, the special leniency that you can use this fat. So, but not for personal use, not for regular things. So it says no, you could use it for anything. So it's including something, some sort of usage, some sort of benefit. That is the opinion of Rabbi Yossi Aglili. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yossi Aglili. We had Rabbi Yossi Aglili before, nothing to do with this. It's gonna come back. We shouldn't get confused. Two opinions here of Rabbi Yossi Aglili. One is regarding the forbidden fat, that there's a permissibility to use it even for other things. And yesterday we had a Rabbi Yossi Aglili that told us that chametz is not asur b'ana on Pesach. No connection, right? But just if we mention the same person, but okay, it's going to come back at us. That's Rabbi Yossi Aglili before, so we shouldn't confuse it. Rabbi Akiva says sheyachal. We could have thought differently. L'malachas hediyat yetar, l'malachas kvei yetame. We could have thought that an avela is tamei. Could have thought that the fat is tamei. I know the meat of an avela is tamei. What about the fat? So Talmudayim l'chol malacha, it says that you could use it for any work, even for things that are kodesh, which means that the fat isn't tamei. The Gemara explains like this. Talmudayim l'chol malacha. Rabbi Yossi Aglili says to tell me that the fat, the chaylev, is not tamei, I don't need a pasuk. What is the pasuk telling me? It's coming to tell me that I'm allowed to have benefit from it. And this would follow Rabbi Vo's opinion. Rabbi Vo says whenever it says you can't eat it, it's forbidden to have benefit. So if Rabbi Yossi Aglili follows Rabbi Vo, every time it says don't eat it, I need a special pasuk to tell me that you're allowed to have benefit. Otherwise, I would have thought that you can't have benefit either. So Rabbi Yossi Aglili says, I wouldn't have, to tell me that it's tar, I don't need a pasuk. You have to tell me that I'm allowed to have benefit from it. That's what I need the pasuk for. Rabbi Akiva says it's anyways mutter b'ana. You can always have benefit from it. That sounds like chizkiyas of you. But it has to tell me that it's tar. Benefit, I don't need a pasuk for. But maybe it's tamei, just like a nevela is tamei, the fat is tamei. So that I need a pasuk for. My love, we're on top of Chof Gimel Amid Beis, is it not? That the following is the machlekes. The Rabbi Yossi Aglili Savar Leisaychlu Mashma Beineser Bechila Beineser Anah. Rabbi Yossi Aglili holds that when it says don't eat, which it says by chelev, it means the chelev of nevela. It says it's referring to don't eat and don't have benefit. So v'chiyasikra. So what's the pasuk coming to tell me? The yasa l'chol malacha. You can do work with it. L'mishrei l'nevela v'hana u'da'asa. It's coming to tell me that this chelev of nevela I can have benefit from. Rabbi Kiva Sava, Rabbi Kiva holds Isra achila mashma, Isra hana lay mashma. When it said you can't eat it, it only means you can't eat it. It never said you can't have benefit. So therefore, v'chiyasikra l'tumah v'tara. Mamish the machlekes Rabavo and Chizkiah. It fits very nice. Which Lemekatanai is a question, so it fits not so nice. So now we have a problem because we have a machlekes Chizkiah Rabavo that's really a machlekes. The Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi Aglili. The Gemara says like. The Gemara always tries to avoid it. We have to search for that. I don't know. I don't remember one. They always try to avoid it. But the way it comes out is sometimes it concludes that it doesn't match up perfectly, that this ton is exactly that ton. Sometimes the way it comes out is that one of the Amirayim says, you know what, it's true that one won't agree with me, and I held with this one. But the other one is going to say, I held like both. Notice both of them will agree with me. But in others, they always avoid that it shouldn't match perfect. But one of them, it's possible, will only fit with one. So here it says, like, it's not the machlekes. The kuli alma la yisaychlu mashma beineser achila beineser, and everyone could hold like Rebbe Vo. That you're not allowed to eat. You're not allowed to have benefit. Whenever it says don't eat, that means you can't have benefit. And here the machlekes says as follows: Rabbi Yossi Aglili Savar. Rabbi Yossi Aglili holds kishahutra nevela hi hutra chelba v'giva lo hutra. Very interesting. Is fat part of the meat? They have to ask a chef. Is the fat part of the meat? So in other words, when nevela was aser, it says nevela is aser. Is the fat included in the nevela that's aser? So Rabbi Yossi Aglili holds that nevela is only the meat. The fat is not part of the nevela. So therefore, we had a special pasuk earlier that says like this, that when there's a nevela, you can give it to the ger, and you can sell it to the nachri. So really, according to Rabavo, nevela taught me, I learned from that, from the one, according to one opinion, according to Reb Meir. I learned from nevela that really, when it says that you can't eat it, you can't have benefit either. There's a special exemption there that I'm allowed to have benefit because the pasuk tells me clearly you can give it here and you can sell it there. So that means that which part of the nevela am I allowed to have benefit from? Whatever is included in the nevela. But according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, the chelev wasn't included in the nevela. So therefore, the chelev is still aser, unless I have a special pasuk that tells me that it's mutter. Where's the pasuk that tells me that it's mutter? I needed a different pasuk than the pasuk by nevela because chelev wasn't part of nevela. Chelev is aser. No. I need a pasuk to tell me that the chelev. No. Right. Oh, yeah. You're asking. Okay. The Pesachim by Nevela mention the chaylev of Nevela, that the chaylev as well. The Pesachim over there say that. Now, the Nevela has a tumah on it. According to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, if the chaylev is not part of the Nevela, then the chaylev of the Nevela isn't tameh. Okay, so I never needed a pasuk to tell me anything about tumah because it's not part of it. The only thing that I needed the pasuk for was to tell me that even though it's forbidden to eat, how do I, and forbidden to eat would tell me automatically that it's forbidden to have benefit. So I need a special pasuk to tell me, besides for the nevela that I'm allowed to have benefit from, because chaylev isn't part of the nevela, I need a special pasuk to tell me I can have benefit from this. You're asking that why do I need the whole pasuk, the whole isser? Okay.
Are we assuming that the chaylev and the meaning are now separated? Or is all still one practice?
I think it would be that you separated it. When you after you separate it, is there tumah on the chaylev? Is there, and can I use it? It becomes a different level of tumah, of touches. Okay. Rabbi Akiva Savar, Rabbi Akiva holds kishahutcha nevela, when nevela is permissible to have benefit from. Where did nevela become permissible to have benefit from? The pasuk told us that you can give it to a ger and you can sell it to a. And Reb Meir actually held that you can do either or, right? Kishutcha nevela chelba v'gidanami hutchu. It also made permissible the fat and the sinews. Why? Because they're part of the nevela. So if I can give the nevela to a ger, so automatically I can give the chaylev because the chaylev is part of the nevela. So v'chiyas shechra l'tumah v'tara. And now clearly I need a pasuk to tell me if it's tahar or tummy. Why? Because if it's part of the nevela, then it's tummy. So I need the pasuk to tell me that it's tar. But really, everyone holds what we just did over here was really both Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva would hold like Rabbi Avahu's view that leisaychal means isra. Now the Gemara says, Rabbi Yossi Aglili ashkechan chaylev d'sharya rachmana b'hana el gid nema da'aser. You only have a pasuk over here if the gid and the chaylev are not part of the nevela, and so you really have no leniency to have benefits from the gid and the chaylev, unless I have a special pasuk that tells me that I'm allowed, which the pasuk does by chaylev, but it doesn't do it for gid. So nevela, I said you give it to a ger. Chaylev, it says you can do work with it. You can use it for work, but the gid is left in the middle, and it's not part of the nevela to be mutter, and it's not part of the chaylev to be mutter. One shot over here is, if you want, you could say that you're right. Gid hanasha. I mean, just the gid hanasha, or all the gidim of a nevela are asabana. Maybe it means all the gidim. Oh, thank you. I don't know if it means gid hanasha or all the gidim, because when the animal died, everything becomes aser, and only the chaylev. No, it's probably the gid hanasha. We say that the gid hanasha should be aser bana. The Gemara says anachanami. You're right. We actually had an opinion like that before. I think Reb Shimon. Oh yeah, we'll have that. Reb Shimon held that. We'll have it in a moment. There isn't a possibility. We could say that the gid hanasha is actually mutter bahana. Why? We can use a kal v'chaymer to be matter. It goes like this. Chaylev set up the weight. What's the kal v'chaymer? We're saying that chaylev is very, very strict. It's very not lenient. Okay, it's very strict, and it's onish kares. You see, it's mamish strict. If someone eats chaylev, he gets kares. However, it's mutter bahana. Gid sheina onish kares. So gid hanasha, that's not so strict. For sure should be mutter like kolshkin. For sure should be mutter bahana. See, gid hanasha is mutter bahana. We have a kal v'chomer that allows it. In other words, we don't have psukim that tell me that the gid anasha is mutter bana, according to Rebbe Bo, because if you're not allowed to eat it, it's automatically asur bana, and it's not nevela, and it's not chaylev, where I have those exemptions that tell me that it's mutter bana. So why should the gid be mutter bana? Because if the chaylev is mutter bana and it's anish karis, then for sure the gid anasha should be mutter bana. Reb Shimon, the asar. Why? So why? What does Reb Shimon do? Reb Shimon held that the gid anasha was asur bana. He says zikul mifrach. He doesn't accept this kal v'chomer because there's a question on the kal v'chomer. Works like this. Chaylev, we're saying, is very not lenient. Very not lenient. It's very strict. And so if it has a leniency, for sure the gid anasha, which is lenient, should have that leniency. So we're saying, actually, the chaylev actually has its own leniency. You're making it that chaylev is so strict, and nevertheless it has a leniency. Actually, chaylev is even more lenient than the gid anasha. Where is chaylev more lenient than the gid anasha? Chaylev is isur karis. We said no. Chaylev doesn't apply to a chaya. Forbidden fats in a wild animal you're allowed to eat. It's mutter legamri. And the gid anasha is asur. So the fact that chaylev is mutter bana, that's because it only applies to certain animals. It doesn't apply to wild animals. The gid anasha that applies to all animals should be asur. That's Reb Shimon's logic. The idach, Reb Shimon has a good point. How do you make a kal v'chomer from something that's not as strong? What does Reb Yossi? Who are we dealing with here? Reb Yossi. Reb Yossi. Bebehema kamrinan. Bebehema mias lo yishtri. We respond back like this. Reb Yossi, he says like this. We're dealing with the chaylev is not part of the nevela. The gid anasha is not part of the nevela, right? And therefore, you don't have the leniency of the chaylev, you don't have the leniency of the nevela on the gid anasha. So how does he? But he learns nevertheless that the gid anasha is mutter bana because he has a kal v'chomer from chaylev. If chaylev is mutter bana, the problem with the kal v'chomer Reb Shimon just told us is that chaylev is really more lenient. So you can't learn if this is lenient, then for sure that was lenient anyway. So he says like this. I'm not looking for the gid hanasha by chaya. I'm looking for the gid hanasha by behema. In an animal, chaylev is stricter because chaylev is asur and it's asur isur karis. The gid hanasha is not an isur karis. So is the gid hanasha in a behema more lenient? Yes. So therefore, if chaylev, which is more strict, is mutter bana, the gid hanasha in an animal, which is more lenient, for sure should be mutter bana. Taisus has a good question. Taisus' question comes out. He says, so that's the case. Then what about a gid anasha in a chaya? A gid anasha in a wild animal should be asur bana. No kal v'chomer from chaylev. That's a good question. No, that's the whole kal v'chomer is only in an animal. That's basically what we're doing. So Taisus says, that we don't have different isurim for the gid anasha. Once you know that when the Torah tells me by an animal that the gid anasha is asur b'achila, and I know automatically that that only means isur achila, not an isur hana, then I don't have another pasuk to tell me gid by the chaya. It's the same pasuk, so it's not going to just become asur b'hana by a chaya if that's not the original isur that it says when it talks about an animal. That's what this says. Okay. No. It would be the gid anasha would be asur b'achila in a chaya, and it would be mutter bana as well. In other words, there was never an isur of I don't have the kal v'chomer over there. I don't need the kal v'chomer by every instance. I only needed it in its original isur, and then okay. Guess what Taisus is doing? Is he's saying it's not that it's asur b'hana and then comes along a kal v'chomer and removes the isur hana. The kal v'chomer tells me what the original isur is, and therefore the original isur was only an isur achila. If the kal v'chomer was removing an isur hana of it, then it would have still applied on the Chaya, and I didn't have a Kavachayma. It says no. The Kavachayma tells me the original Isser. It was never Asr by an animal. Okay. Michti, let's see. You brought all these psukim about things that are forbidden to eat, like summarizing things there. All these things that are forbidden to eat, and you wanted to say that they should also be Asr ba'ana. And you had to bring a reason why they're not Asr ba'ana, because all of these things are permissible. So what are we left with? You ended up in the same spot. Rabavo says everything is Asr ba'ana. If it says you can't eat it, it's Asr ba'ana. So what about all the things that are Asr ba'ana? Each one was an exception. Chizkiah says if it says it's forbidden to eat, it's forbidden to eat. And the things that are Asr ba'ana, that says clearly, but the other things it never said it. So when everything boils down, what it's left with is that they each say the same thing. This Rabavo has exceptions, and Chizkiah didn't have those. Never needed to make exceptions. Set up the rules differently. So, what are they arguing about? The chametz bepesach v'aliba derabanan. What it means? Well, first, before we get to the pligi, first of all, the only things that they actually say that come out that are really asr b'hana is chametz bepesach according to the rabbanon, which they both agree to. It's asr b'hana, but chametz b'pesach according to the rabbanon, as opposed to Rabbi Yossi Aglili that we said before. This was the Rabbi Yossi Aglili that we mentioned yesterday. He says that chametz on Pesach and after Pesach is mutar b'hana. That's what he holds. So according to the Rabbanan, it's Asr Bana, not like Rabbi Seglili. And B'Shara Niskal Valiba de Divrei Akal. And the Shara Niskal, an animal that gored a man and killed him. So it's Asr Bana, you can't have benefit from the meat. Chizkiah Nafik Lemi La Yachal, Rabbavan Nafik Lemi Nevela. Chizkiah learns that the reason why those are Asr is because it says Lo Yachal in a passive. And that's a special type of Isser Achila that also includes Hana. Otherwise, it wouldn't have included those. By Chametz, it says La Yeyachal. Chametz, right? Yeah, La Yeyachal Chametz. And Rabavo learns from Nevela. Now, what it means he learns from Nevela is Nevela teaches me that every time it says La Seichal, La Yeichal, La Yeichlu, it always is a Isser Hana, even if it wasn't La Yeyachal. That's what it means. So both of them agree that chametz and shara niskal are asr ba'ana. There's two things you can't have benefits from. Michti, let's see. Bein lamar is asr ba'ana. My binaya. So what's the difference between them? What comes out from this whole discussion? It's like Hebrew grammar has a lot of these, probably other languages also, but they make a lot of rules. And then you have to deal with the exceptions. Or you can make your rules differently, and then you have to deal with the other exceptions. But that's, so here, you end up with doing the same things. The question is that the exception or is that the rule? So what are you left, okay. Ika beinayu, there is a difference between Chizki and Rabavo, that is chulin shenishchatu ba'azara. We mentioned this before. Chulin, that means a regular animal that was shechted in the azara. That means it's shechted not in the place that it was supposed to be shechted. We compared this to a treifa. Why do we compare this to a treifa? Because we said regarding basar basar the treifa leisechelu akel tashlichna. We learned from that if there is an arm from a fetus that's sticking out of the mother animal, and then when you shechted the animal inside becomes mutter, but the arm is never possible. So we said that's considered chutz l'machitza. So to chulin that is shechted in the azar is also chutz l'machitza. So what's the din by that? Is it asr ba'ana? So the pasuk says la kelev tashlichan oisai, a regular treifa that you can give to the dog, oisai that you can give to the dog, but not chulin. But not chulin shenishchatu ba'azara. You can't give a mundane animal that was shechted in the azara you can't give that to the dog. That's going to be asr ba'ana. Now, who holds that? So it goes like this. Chizkiya savar lo yachal. When the pasuk says lo yachal l'meutei hani, it's excluding what is the hani? Hani is not yet. 1 second. Lo yachal l'meutei hani. It's coming to tell me chametz. Chametz and shar niskal are asr ba'ana. Oisai, when it says that a kelev tashlichan oisai by treifa, l'meutei chulin shenishchutu ba'azara, that chulin shenishchutu ba'azara is asr ba'ana. So Chizkiya has Isser Hana by Chametz and by Shara Niskal from Lo Yakel, and he has an Isser Hana by Chulin Shenishchutu Ba'azara because the word Oisai is only permitting treifa, but not Chulin Shenishchutu Ba'azara. It's a special limit that Chulin Shenishchutu Ba'azara is asr ba'ana. Rabavo Savar Oisai l'meutei hani. Okay, and we have to throw us back into the sugya that we had before. We said that Rabbi Vo holds whenever it says loy yoichal, loy yoichlu, loy soichal, all of those is Isser Hana as well. Even though it says don't eat, it means Isser Hana. Where did we get that from? Because by Nevela it says don't eat a Nevela, and we had a pasuk that tells me nevertheless I'm allowed to give it to a ger and I'm allowed to sell it to a nachri. Now, when it says you're allowed to give it to a ger and sell it to a nachri, we had a machlokes between Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda. Reb Meir held that you're allowed to sell it to a ger and you're allowed to give it to a nachri as well. It was either or. So all the pasuk was doing was telling me that it's mutter. Why did the pasuk have to tell me that it's mutter? Because I would have thought that it's asr ba'ana. The pasuk tells me you can do either or. That was Reb Meir's view. Now, Reb Yehuda argued with Reb Meir there, and he said, no, it's very specific. You can give the nevela to a ger, and you can sell it to a nachri, but you can't do it the other way, which means that the pasuk is not coming to tell you a leniency. The pasuk is telling to tell you a specific halacha of how to do it, which means that it's not telling me a heter hana over there. According to Reb Meir, it's telling me, oh, you could heter hana. According to Reb Yehuda, it's telling me a specific din. So really, I don't know that this was really asr b'hana and now it's becoming mutter b'hana. It never did that to me. The Nevela doesn't teach that to me according to Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara asked, so according to Rabbi Vo, according to Rabbi Yehuda, how do you know that whenever it says that you can't eat it, it means it's asr b'hana? The Gemara says we learn it from Oisai, lakelef tashlich on Oisai by treifa, not by Nevela. And Oisai tells me that only a treifa I can throw to the dog, but everything else is asr b'hana. I can't feed it to a dog. So, if that's the case, that according to Rabbi Vo, according to Rabbi Yehuda, I learned from Oisai an Isser Hana on every time it's a Asr Ba'achila. So then I don't have an Oisai, to teach me Chulin Shenishchatu Ba'azara is Asr Ba'hana, like Rabbi Yossi, like Chizkiya just did. Chizkiya told me that really everything is Mutter Ba'ana. Kel Tashlichan Oisai tells me that Chulin Shenishchatu Ba'azara is Asr Ba'ana. Only the treifa is Mutter Ba'ana, is thrown to the dog. Oisai, only it, but Chulin Shenishchatu Ba'azara is not. But according to Rabbi Vo, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that learns from Oisai that everything is Asr Ba'ana, everything is Asr Ba'ana. So where does he get Chulin Shenishchatu Ba'azara is Asr Ba'ana? Rabbi Vo Savar Oisai L'mutei Hani Chulin Shenishchatu Ba'azara Lav Deraisa Nino. He says you're right. It's not a deraisa. It comes out Rabbi Vo that's so strict about everything is lenient in Chulin Shenishchatu Ba'azara. Okay, Yosef Ahum Merabanan Kamei Reb Shmuel Bar Nachmani. There was a student, a rabbi, that was sitting in front of Reb Shmuel Bar Nachmani. Reb Yosef Amar, and he was sitting and he was saying Shmei Reb Yeshua ben Levi in the name of Reb Yeshua ben Levi. Okay. Minayin, this is what he's saying. Minayin l'kol yisurin shebatayra l'chi hechi da'asurim ba'achila chinam yasurim ba'ana. How do we know that everything that the Torah says that you're not allowed to eat, it's also you can't have benefit from. And what are the things that we're referring to? Chametz Pesach v'shar niska. Those two things that we know are Asr Ba'ana. What's the source for that? So, Reb Shmuel Bar Nachmani, what do they call this? Active listening. When they interrupt, they keep. He said, Minayin, you're asking a question. It says la yachal. What are you asking? What are you about to tell me? It's we know this already. It says la yachal. So la yachal isra chila mashmale isra nalei mashmale. He responds to me. He says no. Rabbi Shua ben Levi is not going to say that because he holds that la yachal doesn't mean isra hana. He doesn't go like a Rabavo. He doesn't even hold like Chizkiah. Chizkiah said that one phrase, the passive, lo yachal, teaches me a certain. No, Reb Shua ben Levi doesn't hold of that either. So Reb Shmuel Bar Nachmani says, Teiba claim in Nevela. So we can learn it from Nevela. Because by Nevela, it says that you're not allowed to eat it. And according to Reb Meir, the pasuk is coming to tell me I'm allowed to do things with it. I'm allowed to give it, sell it. So Savlak Reb Yehuda. So Rabbi Shua ben Levi doesn't hold of Reb Meir. Also Rabbi Yehuda, Damadvarim Kiksavim. He says that you have to, it's not a leniency over there that says that it's mutabana. It says you have to specifically give it to the ger, sell it to the nach. The Gemara says, so what? Let him learn from Isai, which is exactly what Rabbi Yehuda does. So he says, he can't learn it from there because he says that Isai, the way Rabbi Vo learned Isai, not like the way not like the way Rabbi Vo did. Rabbi Vo said Isai was lav daraisa. He holds that as the daraisa, so we're left with no limud from Isai to tell me that everything is asr bana. So back to his question, minayin. So what's the source? Okay, now we're entering into a new sugya. The ksiv, the pasuk says, "Kol chatas hashiyuva midama." Any chatas the blood is supposed to be sprinkled outside by the mizbeach that's outside the sanctuary. There's two of mizbeach, right? The mizbeach outside the sanctuary, the large mizbeach with the ram, and usually a chatas, a sin offering, the blood is sprinkled there on the outside mizbeach. If there is the type of chatas that the blood is brought inside, it's called the chatas hapnimis, but those chatos is done, the service is done differently. They're burnt outside, it's different. And here, if a regular chatas, the blood is brought inside, so it invalidates the chatas. And the rule is, kol chatas hashiva midama, it says you cannot eat it, it has to be burnt with fire. She'in talmud leimer beis tisarif. The pasuk didn't need to tell me that it needs to be burnt. Why does it tell me that it needs to be burnt? And I have a different source that tells me that it needs to be burnt. This pasuk didn't need to do that. If it doesn't need it to tell it to me, the ksiv, why doesn't it need to tell me that it needs to be burnt? Tell me the halacha. What do you do with it? It says v'hinei seirach. Remember in Parsha Shmini, they burnt after Nadav and Abihu died, right? They brought the strange fire. The two sons of Aaron brought the strange fire. So it was the first day of the inauguration, and they burnt the sacrifices. They didn't eat it. So Moshe Rabbeinu gets upset with Aaron, and he's telling him, "Why didn't you eat that sacrifice? And why did you burn that sacrifice? The blood wasn't brought inside the sanctuary when it wasn't supposed to. In other words, that would have been an excuse for you to burn it." Which means that I know from there that if the blood is brought inside when it wasn't supposed to be brought inside, that it needs to be burnt. So why over here does it need to tell me that it needs to be burnt? So we have a very interesting limud. It says, if it wasn't necessary for that specific halacha, that the blood being brought inside by a chatas, that the blood wasn't supposed to be brought inside, I don't need to say over there that it's burnt, because I know from a different source that it's burnt. So why does it say that it's burnt? So we'll apply it to everywhere else. That's other parts of the Torah, something needs to be burnt. What is that? Chametz and Shara Niskal. That it says that you're not allowed to eat it. What it means also is that you have to burn it. Where do I get that from? Because I have an extra pasuk by a chatas that the blood was brought inside. It says over there you burn it. It's not necessary to say it. I'm going to use it to teach me. that it's asur ba'ana. It's not coming to tell me that you can't eat it because I know already that those two things you can't eat. So it's coming to tell me that it's asur ba'ana. The Gemara says, well, what about imakan b'sreifa afkalisun shabater b'sreifa? Maybe they have to be burnt specifically, right? It doesn't say. We never heard that chametz. Well, we know according to Rabbi Yehuda, chametz needs to be burnt, but ashar and iskal needs to be burnt. Amar kra b'kodesh beis tisarif b'kodesh b'sreifa and kalisun shabater b'sreifa. The only things that need sreifa are the things that are b'kodesh, is the sacrifice that needs to be burned. But when we're using the pasuk to teach me other things as have the isur hana, over there it doesn't need to be burned. The Gemara says you're learning from b'kodesh to tell me b'kodesh beis tisarif to tell me that the rule that it needs to be burnt is only sacrifices, but not other things. That pasuk is teaching me something else. You can't learn from this that only sacrifices are burnt. Hi b'kodesh beis tisarif la'achi da'asa. Using this pasuk to teach me that sacrifices are burnt. That's what it's coming to teach me. To teach you, I use that pasuk for something else. Look at Reb Shimon. For what Reb Shimon said, the Tanya Reb Shimon, I'm a b'kodesh beis tisarif, limit al chatash tisarif and b'kodesh. It's coming to tell me that if a chatas becomes pasul, that I burn it in the azara. I know it needs to be burnt, but I didn't know where. So the pasuk b'kodesh beis tisarif, you're telling me that it's coming to teach me that I only burn chatas that became pasul because the blood was brought inside. That's what you're telling me. But you don't burn chametz and shar and iskal because it says b'kodesh beis tisarif. Really, the truth is that b'kodesh beis tisarif tells me the location of where I burn a chatas that became pasul, and therefore you don't really have a pasuk that tells me that you don't burn other things that aren't kodesh. How do I know that other karbanas as well that became pasul, if it's kachei kachim or emurim from kachim kalim, the limbs that are supposed to be brought on the mizbeach, that if they became pasul, how do I know that I burn them as well in the azara? Talmud Leimer b'kodesh beis tisarif. So you've used that pasuk already, and you don't have it to teach you what you want it to teach you. So you're left with, you don't really have a full source for what Rabbi Shua ben Levi is trying to teach us. It's already used for something else. Amar lei, so this rabbi says back to Reb Shmuel bar Nachmani, he says, Rabbi Yonasan Rabach mehai kra kamala, you're right. That pasuk is a bit of an issue when your teacher actually doesn't use this pasuk. He learns from something else. He says, if there's leftover from the flesh of the inauguration offering, from the loaves of bread until the morning, it says that you should burn what's left over in fire. It should not be eaten because it's holy. It didn't need to say over there that it shall not be eaten. Why? Because if you burn it in fire, then obviously you don't eat it. So why did it say don't eat it? If you don't need it for itself, because it already says that you burn it. If you burn it, then you couldn't eat it. So we'll apply it to other isurim. Well, other isurim tell me that you can't eat it anyway. So and if I can't use it for achila because it already said that you can't eat it, so it must be telling me that you can't have benefit. The Gemara says 1 second, but over there it says that you have to burn it. So we're back to the same problem. Maybe those other things, those two items, have to be burnt. So amakra b'sraf desa noiser. You burn what's left over. Noiser b'sreifa and kolisun shabater b'sreifa. You don't burn the other things. Right. But what do I do after it doesn't? No, it was talking about nicer. And then it says, V'sarafta es nicer, you burn the nicer. It didn't have to say the nicer because that was the context. Could have just said V'sarafta isai or something. So why does it say nicer? Nicer is coming to tell me that the only thing that I burn, that I destroy to burning is nicer. The Gemara says, back to the not eating, of these sacrifices that are left over, the inauguration sacrifice that are left over. It's coming to teach me that you can't have benefit from chametz on Pesach, and you can't have benefit from Shar Niskal. We've used that pasuk already for something that Rebbe Lazar taught. You shall not eat it because it's holy. Kol shebekodesh pasal, v'akasav litin leisa say ala chilase. I understand that you couldn't eat it because if you burn it, you can't eat it. But let's say you did eat it. What happens to you? So the pasuk never told me not to eat it. I'm not. It told me to do something else. It told me So what would happen here is if the pasuk says do not eat it, and you ate it, then you get malchus. But if the pasuk says burn it, and you didn't burn it, you ate it, so then you violated the negative, the positive law. You avoided that mitzvah. You violated that mitzvah. But it doesn't say that you get malchus. So therefore, Rabbi Lazar says that the pasuk la yachal is telling me that you get malchus if you do eat it. What are you telling me? This pasuk is not necessary, and it's coming to teach me Yisr Hana by two other items. I need the pasuk to tell me that you get malchus. Amar Abaya la'ilam mikra kama. Abaya says we're actually going to use the beginning of the pasuk. The beginning of the pasuk says. Not the beginning of the pasuk, the first pasuk that we learned before. That says Kol chatas sheyu v'dama Kodesh Pnima. It says Be'esh Tisare Ve'epach, and we're going to do it the opposite way. We're not going to learn from Be'esh Tisare like we learned before, because we need that pasuk to teach me that it's burnt in the Zara. What are we going to do? Ve'epach the lichter Be'esh Tisare v'lei ba'ilei seichal. It could have just said. Before we were learning from Be'esh Tisarif. Now we're learning from the fact that over there it says you shall not eat it. You shall not eat it, it's burnt in fire. So we're going to take that pasuk that says you shall not eat, and we're going to ask, Ma talmud laimar leiseichal? Why does it need to say that you shall not eat it? Why? Because it already says you have to burn it. I don't need it legufay, because Rabbi Lazar uses the next pasuk that we had that says, that pasuk Rabbi Lazar told me is that there's a prohibition of eating something that's supposed to be burnt. So therefore I have the first pasuk that we had before that says that if the blood is brought inside, I have extra words that says so so we'll use it meaning back to where we started from. Maybe you have to burn it as well. Okay. What Abaya just did for us is when we used the first pasuk that spoke about the blood going inside Zara, we were left with a question. The question was that maybe the two things that you want to have an Isser Hana on, which is chametz and Shara Niskal, need to be burnt as well. That was our question. And we said no. The only thing that needs to be burnt is Bakodesh. That was our answer. The problem with that answer was that Bakodesh was teaching me the location of where to burn things that became puzzle, so I couldn't use that pasuk. So we introduced a new pasuk, and this pasuk was by the Miluim. What we ended off with the Miluim was the same issue. Maybe everything needs to be burnt, and we responded with Noiser. Noiser needs to be burnt, and not other things need to be burnt. But what we're left with on this pasuk was that the pasuk that says you shall not eat, that was being used by Rebbe Lazar to teach me that you get malchus if you do eat. So I was left with, I don't have a source from this as well. So it comes along Abaya and says, let's go back to the first pasuk. You were left with a problem over there of maybe it needs to be burnt. It needs to be burnt as well. So instead of learning from the Ba'ish Tisarif, a Bakaidesh, instead of learning from Bakaidesh based Tisarif, and that pasuk was already used to tell me the location, we're going to learn from the pasuk of Hanaisar Bisreifa, the pasuk of that says Naisar. What's left over is Bisreifa, but not Bakaidesh. That's how we resolved it. So only the Naisar is burnt, but not the other. Amalei Rav Papa Abaya. Rav Papa asks Abaya. Rav Papa is a student of Abaya. Asks him a very basic question. Maybe it needs to tell me that it has its own lab. It has its own negative prohibition. Because if you're just going to learn from Rebbe Lazar, and Rebbe Lazar is teaching me in every sort of condition where I need to, every scenario that I need to burn it, there's also a prohibition that you're not allowed to eat it. That's called the lav shebachlalas. And aim like in a lav shebachlalas. Lav shebachlalas means if I have a general prohibition that says, do not violate the Torah or something. I say, oh, Malchus again. And we don't do that. We don't say you get Malchus because it says, just keep the rules. Malchus is only applied to a specific prohibition, not on lav shebachlalas, not on a negative prohibition that has included in it a bunch of other prohibitions. So Rav Papa is asking Abaya that you're trying to gain a pasuk here by telling me that Rebbe Lazar's pasuk is a general pasuk, and it's going to cover this as well. But maybe Rebbe Lazar's pasuk doesn't satisfy because I need to get Malchus. I need to have individual psukim by each one. Elam Rav Papa mehachas. So therefore, Rav Papa says we need a different source. It says V'abasar sheyiga b'chol tamei lo yeyachal b'eish yisaref. Learning from Tuma. Any flesh that touches something that's tamei should not be eaten. It should be burnt. You don't have to tell me that you can't eat it if it's going to be burnt. Why does it have to tell me don't eat it? I mean, in legufay, if it's not necessary for itself, because I would know that you can't eat it anyway. I have a kal v'chaimer from Meiser. Why does he have to do this? He could say that it's burnt. Obviously, you can't. Oh, he doesn't want to say burnt because then that's not going to tell me a lav. He wants to give me a negative prohibition as well. So, Meiser akal, I can learn a kal v'chaimer from Meiser. Ma Meiser akal mater le'be'at mena b'tamei. When it comes to Meiser Sheni, you're supposed to take it to Yerushalayim. Over there, it says when you say your speech, it says I did not consume it when with tuma. Basar kaidesh chamer like kolshkin. So if meiser, which is so lenient, can't be eaten betuma, so basar kaidesh for sure can't be eaten betuma. So why do you have to say a pasuk la yaichal that you can't eat betuma? Chite mein masir minadin. Maybe you're going to resolve this and say you don't get malchus. You don't get a warning, which later incurs malchus from a kal v'chaimer. You're telling me a kal v'chaimer, therefore now you're going to get punished because there's a kal v'chaimer. It says it's not a kal v'chaimer. Hikeshahu. It's close to it in the pasuk. It's a comparison of a juxtaposition. It says over there karbanas right next to meiser. Ma talmud leimer. So therefore, what does it have to tell me? My talmud leimer la yoichal. Why does it have to tell me don't eat it? If I know already I can't eat it betuma, and if it tells me that I can't eat it, which is not necessary, it's coming to tell me that you can't have benefits from. We're back to the original question, the question that we asked on each one of these limudim, that maybe you have to burn it. Okay. Amalei Ravina Ravashi. Ravina asked Ravashi a very basic question. He says, sometimes you find in the Torah that you have a prohibition that if you do that prohibition, you violated 5 prohibitions or 4 prohibitions. So your whole limud here is because it already tells me it's forbidden. So therefore, I'm going to use this to tell me some other law which has no connection to this. Maybe it's coming to tell me that it's prohibited twice, 3 times, 4 times, but there's never anything extra. You get extra, yeah. Ve'ema laver lav b'shnei lavin. Lav mi amar Abaya. Did Abaya not say achol petisa like arba, nemala like a chamish, tzira like a sheish? We have these different creatures that, if you look at the psukim, one is a water insect, one is a worm that's on the ground, one is a flying insect. Each one is going to incur another set of malchus because it says don't eat this, don't eat that, and it combines together. You get all the prohibition. Amalei, so he says, if I'm able to learn something, then I don't just say that it's 2, 3, 4 prohibitions. I'd rather get something new than to just double up the punishments. Why did it have to say that the flesh that touches anything that's tummy should not be eaten? Why does it have to say that? What am I learning from V'habasar? It says l'rabes eitzim u'levaina. That extra word V'habasar is coming to include not just basar that's tummy, but it's coming to include the wood, and the frankincense also becomes tummy, like we said before. That those things can also have the same issue of chibas hakedesh. I think we learned from before, even though it's not food. V'habasar kaltar yoichal basar the seifel amali. Why does it have to say v'habasar over there that it only if it's pure you could eat it? L'Rabbi Simurim is coming to tell me the organs or the limbs that are brought on the mizbeach. The Gemara says Imurim mihasam nafka. Those limbs that are brought on the mizbeach you learned from v'habasar. The Tanya, rather Imurim mihasam nafka. We learn it from somewhere else. What is that? The Tanya was started in the Brayso. V'nefesh shetechel basar mizebech hashlam asher Hashem. Anyone that's going to eat from the flesh of the sacrifice that belongs to Hashem, l'Rabbi says Imurim is coming to include those organs that are brought on the mizbeach. The Gemara says like this. 1 second. There's 2 problems of eating food with tumah. One is hasam tumah saguf b'karis. If the person is tamei and he eats from a sacrifice, then there's karis. The other one is hachat tumas basar belav. The other one is if the flesh is tamei and he's tar, then it's only a negative prohibition. That's just a negative prohibition. That's why we have 2 different sources for eating something when there's tumah.